BookTube. This is the 4th installment of my War and Peace read-along. This section takes into itself the last chapter of book 1 and the first 6 chapters of book 2. So let's get going. I'm just going to run through the last chapter of the first book before I introduce the new characters, because we have a whole cavalcade of new characters within the next book because we're at the war section. So, the very last chapter, we have the younger Prince Gwelkonsky leaving after the dinner he had at his father's place. We have 2 very important conversations that happen between him and his sister, and then him and his father. The first one that happens is between him and his sister. Mary comes into his rooms as he's packing and makes a very big deal about a request that she would like of him, and he must say yes, and he's worried about what this request could be. Before we get to the actual request, she has been speaking to the little princess, and she is quite concerned about the state of her brother's marriage. She's worked out that neither of them are happy, and she's imploring him to change his attitude and definitely go and speak to her before he leaves for war, as if that had to be a question. And it's obvious from the outsider that his sister is that something is wrong. She then goes on to request her entreaty of him, and that is to wear an idol, a painted idol that their grandfather wore during his time off at war and brought him home safe. There's an exchange with kissing of the idol. Mary goes off to wake the little princess so that he can say goodbye to her. The prince is then admitted into his father's rooms, where I think he's at the lathe making snuff boxes. You can tell that he's been, the older Prince Bolkonsky is very affected by the idea of his son's possible imminent death, and he's distracting himself from that by talking about his own, along the lines of, oh, I'll die much longer before you, so here are these papers that tell what to be done with the estate, what to be done for entrusting for his sister, what to be done for the serfs, etc. As he leaves the older Prince Bolkonsky's rooms, the Prince Bolkonsky, in a very male, standoffish way, yells at him to leave before, and it really is before he can show that he's going to cry. He's really quite affected, and he didn't want anyone to see that. Of course, this startled the women, being Mary and the little princess that were waiting outside, thinking that something had gone terribly wrong. The little princess faints away, and they don't get the fond farewell that she was hoping for, and definitely Mary was hoping for. The last thing that the prince asks for his father to do is to get a special obstetrician style person in from Moscow for her pregnancy, because she is, and this is at a time when many women die during pregnancy. It's just, he shows he cares on a level, but not enough not to go to war, because he really doesn't have to. Then he just leaves. That's it. He's gone. His wife's passed out on a chair somewhere, and he gone. Later on, the older prince comes out and sees the women sitting around trying to revive the little princess, and goes, oh, he's gone, oh well, and shuts the door again. And that's it. Now we move on to book 2. This is set nominally in 1805. We have quite a few new characters, so let's go through them now. We have the Commander-in-Chief, Kutsakov, and he is in charge of the regiment that most of our main characters that we've met so far are in. We have Novitsky, we have the Hussar, which is Zhirkov, we have the Cavalry Captain Denisov, we have the Lieutenant Telyani, and we have a side character, the Colonel Bogdanich. Chapter 1, we join a regiment a half-mile outside of the small town where they're going to be stationed, and they have been told they need to be ready for an inspection by the Commander-in-Chief, Kuzakov. Now, there is a part in this where the regiment commander is described, and it is another one of those really odd sections that struck me. So it was plain the commander admired his regiment, rejoiced in it, and that his whole mind was engrossed by it. Yet his strut seemed to indicate that beside military matters, social interests in the fair sex occupied no small part of his thoughts. I don't know how someone walks to show that he's a bit of a horn dog, but apparently that was all obvious by the way he was walking up and down in front of the regiment. They aren't sure, because of the dispatch's wording, whether they should be in marching order or in inspection order. So they think, well, better to bow lower than expected than not bow enough. Overnight, they do up the whole regiment. Every button has been shined, every boot has been polished, and the boots being a bit of a bone of contention because they've done 700 miles of marching and they're full of holes, but they're shining and beautiful. And they'd sent off an aide-de-camp to find out whether that was what they wanted. Turns out the Commander-in-Chief, Kuzakov, wanted them in marching order, so the more bedraggled, especially their boots, the better. So within half an hour, they've got to get back into their greatcoats. Now, this causes a problem because Dolokhov is in a blue coat. Now, Dolokhov was one of the guys that was with Pierre and Prince Vasily's son, Anatole, when the bear incident happened. And he's been bumped back down to regiment. He's been demoted to ranks, and he's in the wrong colour jacket. The regiment's commander sees this and starts just going off on him. Dolokhov is not having any of it and refuses to be spoken to in such a manner, which shows he's got connections far higher than the regiment commander, because the regiment commander goes, yes, probably you're right, please change your coat, because they're all supposed to be in grey. Chapter 2, we have Kutuzov turns up with his retinue and an Austrian commander. Basically, this is just him inspecting the troops. That's the whole of chapter 2. We also find out that Prince Andrew is part of his suite of officers. He's the aide-de-camp, along with the two other new characters, Nezvitsky and the Hussar Zherkov. And he goes round and looks at the troops and says, the boots, they're very bad. Prince Andrew reminds the Commander-in-Chief that he wanted to talk to Dolokhov about his demotion to ranks. Dolokhov then starts talking about his worthiness and his duty to the Emperor, and the Commander-in-Chief just walks away. He's heard it all before. Chapter 3, the Commander-in-Chief and the Austrian commander start back off to town. They're talking about the fact that they're going to join their troops up with the Archduke Ferdinand. We then get confirmation, a couple of bits of confirmation. Prince Andrew hasn't changed much. Prince Andrew has changed a fair bit since joining the army and joining up with the Commander-in-Chief. He was given a letter of recommendation to the Commander-in-Chief from his father and was taken to Vienna with him to keep him close. But the majority of the retinue actually dislike him. We're then given the confirmation that Austria has been defeated and the majority of them have surrendered at Ulm. At this news, Prince Andrew witnesses the other two aide-de-camps, Zherkov and Novitsky, making jokes about it, and Prince Andrew blows his stack at them and says how incredibly unpatriotic, basically, this sort of action is. Chapter 4, we go back to Nicholas Rustov, and he is 2 miles out of Branou with the Pavlograd Hussars in a German town. He arrives back at his billet before his commanding officer. He's been out finding hay for the horses. A short while after he arrives, his commanding officer gets back and he's been out all night playing cards, losing at cards. Hands over his purse, says, would you hide this, would you put away with this somewhere? Rustov counts it out and puts it underneath his commanding officer's pillow. So Lieutenant Talyanin, who Rustov actually bought his horse off, arrives and is talking to Rustov's CO, Captain Denisov, talking to a Lieutenant Talyanin, who then offers to show Nicholas Rustov how to shoe his horse in order for it not to go lame, because it's going a bit lame in the front leg. When he leaves, Captain Denisov asks for his purse back and it's nowhere to be found. Nicholas works out who's taken it. It's the lieutenant, bolts off after them, finds him in the headquarters, accuses him in front of everyone, and is so disgusted at the performance that the lieutenant makes that he tells him to keep it. Nicholas is in a lot of hot water in the next chapter. He's accused a superior officer of a crime in front of a whole heap of other superior officers in the headquarters. Colonel Bogdanovich told him he was telling an untruth, and Nicholas is refusing to retract or apologise. Talyanin is going to be struck off the list as sick. Nicholas is convinced that that's enough of a punishment by Captain Denisov. Then all of a sudden, everything all about that is forgotten because Mac has surrendered the Austrians. Chapter 6, Kutskov falls back into Vienna. So we're moving on in the story. They've fallen back across a couple of different rivers, blown up the bridges as they go, and they're going across the Danube. They've still got the bridge there, and all of a sudden there's gunfire and cannonballs coming over the ridge, and they're sitting down having refreshment, talking about visiting the nunnery in a typical sort of chauvinistic male sort of sense. Denisov suggests maybe we should get off the bridge and blow it, and that's taken under advisement. And that's the end of chapter 6. As soon as I've read the next bit, I'm almost up to date. I will do my next video and we'll see where this war bit goes and how short my videos get, because I'm bored out of my skull with troop movements. I will see you next time. Ta-da!